No, thank you for reminding. Okay, so this is disclosures part 2. We're only really going to be focusing on two forms here, and the first one is the AVID. The AVID is the Agent Visual Inspection Disclosure. I mentioned this last week that by statute, an agent is required to do a visual inspection of the property and 1 to 4. That is required by law. Not that they use an AVID, but that they do a visual inspection. Now, the office requires, and many offices require, that in order to accomplish that you do use this form called the AVID, the Agent Visual Inspection Disclosure. So, and in the instance of a listing agent, on the TDS, there's a little box that the agent's visual inspection was done and see the attached AVID. And as I mentioned last week, that TDS is not finished until the AVID is given to the buyer. So if you wait until the end and don't give it, and they've already removed all their contingencies, and they see something on your AVID that they don't like, they can rescind that sale by law. So it's really important to do your AVIDs early. They should be done in the same time frame that the seller has to get disclosures, and that's according to the, unless it's changed on the RPA, that's 7 days. So so it's really important. So you should be doing your AVID within the 7 days. So so the front of the AVID just explains what the duties of the agent are. It is limited. It's called the agent visual. They are not going to climb on, agents are not going to climb on the roof. They're not going to go into the attic. They're not going to move things in order to see something. They're not going to check to see if the appliances work. You know, it's just a straight visual. It is visual, but also you should be looking, or not looking, but you should be using your other senses, what you hear. There's a lot of traffic noise that should be noted. And what you smell, if there is a particular odor that is offensive, or it doesn't even have to be offensive. There's a strong odor of, you know, maybe you live next to a perfume factory, I don't know. But those things should be noted, because you need to do a thorough, in-depth inspection of the property. So that's really, really important. So, and it breaks it down. Let's go from the top first. Inspection was conducted by what's the, you know, who performed it, the time, and the weather conditions. Why are those important? If it was done on a rainy day and you didn't note a wet spot on the ceiling, then that would infer that there wasn't a leak at the time that this inspection was done. So it is important to put that stuff down. And that's the reasoning behind it. And other persons present. Why other persons present? Because if there's an issue, they're going to call those other persons as a witness. So it's really important to note all of these things. So it's room by room. We've all seen this form, and I will jump to if there's they've added that if there's additional rooms or additional structures, you can add an addendum to cover those, the garage and parking, excluding common areas, because it doesn't cover common areas. It's areas strict to the unit, the yard, the front and the back, and then other observed or known not specified above. Now, this is where you would write, according to the neighbor, there's there is a smoke emanating from the house at various times. I don't know. If you were told something, secondhand, and you haven't seen it, but you were told it, then you should be disclosing it, unfortunately. So this is where you would notate those things, those types of things. I had a listing where our open house was on the weekend. There's a large common area outside of the unit, and I observed homeowners letting their dogs run off leash in this open area. Now, it doesn't bother everybody, but you don't know that this person who buys this has a big fear of dogs, and they move in and there's all these big dogs running around outside their unit. So you would note stuff like that. Excuse me. So once again, it is the firm that inspected, the person who inspected. Now, I mentioned this last week also because it came up that somebody had taken a listing that it was out of the area, which is fine. You can sell property anywhere in California because you have a California real estate license. But I was told by the TC, well, they're not going to be able to do the Avid because they're not going to go to Central California in order to do so. What's the waiver to do this? Well, as I explained, there was not a waiver. There is not a waiver. This is required by law. A visual inspection is required by law. So you have some choices. Your buyer, if you're representing the buyer or you're representing the seller, walk around with a FaceTime or Zoom or whatever you want to do, walking around with a camera going room to room, and you notate the things just like you were actually there. You notate them on the Avid. And the only thing that I would suggest is attaching an addendum saying, agent wasn't present at the thing. This is how we did it. Seller walked around with with an iPhone or whatever it was, and that's how it was done. So it is clear that the agent wasn't present, but they still did their visual inspection. Why is this so important? Why, I say that this is one of the most important documents that you're ever going to use in a real estate transaction as an agent, especially a listing agent. And the answer to that is because if there's an issue, if an issue arises after close of escrow, that something wasn't disclosed that was pretty evident or pretty clear to the naked eye, that should have been visible or should have been caught, or even one of those instances about our friend Gladys Kravitz, told you about something, that rumored whatever, and you didn't put it on this form, then this is one of the documents that a lawyer is going to pull. It's one of the first documents they're going to look at, and they're going to see what's on this avid. What did you disclose in your visual inspection? And that's why you need to take your time. You need to do it a thorough job. And you need to really write out what you see. The things that I don't want to see is nothing noted, nothing noted, this room, nothing noted, this room, nothing noted. You can always find something wrong with a property, even new construction. There are defects in new construction. They didn't paint something right. There's still a scuff on the wall. You know, the stagers scuffed the wall. They smudged the floor. There's always something that you can find. And so you can't say that there isn't a problem. And the reason why I want you to be notating this is because they're going to look at this, and one of the questions they're going to ask you is, how long did this take you to do? And if you say it took me 45 minutes to an hour, and you're writing nothing noted, it doesn't take you 45 minutes to walk through a house. I don't care how big it is. So they're gonna get you on that. So that's why it's really, really, really important to fill this out, to be thorough, to look for those things that are not ordinary. Now, we don't use adjectives. We don't speculate as to the cause. If there's a stain on the ceiling, it's a stain on the ceiling. It's not a stain on the ceiling from a leak. You don't know what it's from. Somebody could have thrown pasta up on the ceiling and then they left the stain there. You don't know what it's from. You can't know that what it's from. So you don't say a large, you don't use those adjectives. It's just straightforward: stain on the ceiling, scuff on the wall, scratch on the floor, chip in the tile, caulking missing. It's stuff like that, and you don't exaggerate, you don't embellish, and you don't speculate as to the cause. That's the most important thing. You don't speculate as to the cause. Now, there is an app, Glide, that I recommend. Some agents don't like it because it was bought by Compass, but it's still a great app. And it's very user-friendly for you, the agent, but more importantly, it's user-friendly for your clients, the sellers, when they're doing disclosures. Now, you as the agent can do your AVID, but the seller can do the TDS and the SBQ off of this app. And it's really straightforward. It doesn't look like this. It doesn't look like the TDS and the SBQ. It's like a survey. Excuse me, what do you have? Do you have an oven? Yes. It asks straightforward questions that it then plugs into the form in the form that we know. So I recommend it. If you haven't used it, try it out. It's called Glide, and play with it. Make up a property and send it to yourself as the seller, and as to how it's going to be filled out. So I'm going to stop sharing this because I want to go. right up here, actually, I never noticed this before. Right up here, there's a thing that says Forms Tutor. So I want to go to Forms Tutor. And that's a great way to enter it, but I'll show you the other way to enter it from car.org. Go to Transaction Center, and then you go to Forms Tutor right there. But so let's open Forms Tutor. And the reason why I want to go to Forms Tutor for this document, and I've shown you guys this before. It doesn't have all the forms on it, but it has a lot of them. It does have the Avid here, and I want to read. It's it's not here. That I want to know. It's the next page, I think. Let me look. Is that where? Okay, yes, here it is. Pages 2 and 3 list the rooms typically found in residential properties. For every room that is found in the particular property, as well as the property outside and yard, the agent should conduct a visual inspection and write down, and this is the important part, guys, write down any material items that may negatively affect a buyer's decision to buy or the price of the buyer is willing to pay. To negatively affect. This isn't a marketing piece. I can't be more clear on this. It's not trying to sell the property to the buyer. You're trying to talk them out of this, buying this, or paying the price that they're paying. And it's not, you have to, you're not pointing out the features, you're pointing out the defects. That's the most important thing. It's not hardwood floors. It is scratch in hardwood floors, granite countertops. It is chip in granite countertops. This is so important. I don't want to see a marketing piece. I want to see reasons why, or point out to the buyer what is negative in the house. And I know sellers don't like this, but it is for their own good, because you need to point that buyer in that direction. And if they say at a later date, well, I didn't see that at the time, it's like, well, it's in my Avid. You should have seen it because I pointed you right to it. So so that is really, really important. So I wanted to show you this in a Forms Tutor, because that's the crux of this document, the Avid. It is to point out the negative aspects of the property. So that's pretty much the Avid. I'm going to move on to the next one unless anybody has any questions regarding the Avid.
So if you have a 4-unit, 3-unit, 2-unit property, you have to do an Avid for each of them. And also SPQ TDS as well, right?
The TDS, yes. The SPQ, I don't think that, well, you are definitely a TDS, because TDS is specific, you know, it asks what specifically is in a property, and are any of those not functioning. So it could be different for each unit. Well, each unit could have been altered. So I probably would do an SPQ for all of them, for each one, but you probably could get away with just one. I'm thinking with the SBQ.
So TDS Avid, you say definitely do for
Yes,
all of the units.
absolutely, yes.
So Keller Williams Beverly Hills office, their TC said that their office doesn't do that. They don't. I expected an Avid. I expected all Avids, SBQ and TDS. Obviously, maybe now just Avid TDS, but they said that they don't do that. So
that's called a lawsuit waiting to happen.
Really?
So,
okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, really, because how can all of those units be alike? I mean, they're just trying to get away with the lease that they because there could be an issue in one unit that doesn't exist in the other two or three. So it really is to your advantage as the agent and to the seller's advantage to make sure that there is at least a TDS and an Avid for every unit in a 1-to-4, because you're doing your due diligence. Like I said, I don't know if you were here at the beginning, but if if there is an issue, a lawyer is going to pull the Avid. One of the first things that they're going to, and the TDS and the SVQ, it's one of the first documents that they're going to pull because they want to see what was disclosed. So if you in Beverly Hills are only doing one, and there was an issue, with one of those units, then versus you doing it for every single one, you're going to look a lot better than that agent. I mean, it's just, it goes to common sense.
They represented the seller, so me representing the buyer,
exactly.
we're okay then. But the seller,
you're
they should
okay.
do it.
No, you're right. As a seller, you really should be doing it. Absolutely. So that's a good point. Thanks for pointing that out.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So back. Now we're going to go to this. You're seeing this, correct? My zip form?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. So now we're going to do the favorite form that everybody loves. The fire hardening and defensible space. Okay, this is required on 1-to-4 units where a TDS is required. So if it's exempt from the TDS, then it's exempt from this, whether it's in a high fire zone or not. So, but it is statutorily required, and if it's not done, and it needed to be done, once again, a sale can be rescinded. So even after close of escrow, things can be rescinded after close of escrow. If they find out that you were supposed to do a fire hardening, and I mean, I don't know exactly what would be, I'm in a fire zone, and I mean, it probably would be somebody trying to take advantage of the system, but it's still, by law, it's allowed. So just know that. So if a TDS is required and it's in a high or very high fire zone, this form is required to be filled out by the seller. Okay, so let's start from there. The next thing, in order to determine whether it's in a high or very high fire zone, pull the NHD report. You can pull the NHD report at any time. Any NHD company is going to give you the report and bill it through escrow. If it doesn't go into escrow or it doesn't close, they're not going to charge anybody for that. Most NHD companies will do that. So know that if you suspect it's in a high or very high zone, have your NHD company pull it. So now here's here's the first area where things get confusing. There are different levels of where it's in a high or very high fire zone. There's the state level, and every different level does their own maps. So there's a state map as to whether it's high or very high zone. And there's also a county map, whether it's high or very high zone. If it falls within either of those, because it can say, no, it's not in a high zone in the state, but it is in a high zone in the county, it can do that. The report, you really have to look at these reports, and it can say that it is in a high zone in the county, but not in the state. You still need to do this form. This form is just what I want to say. It's just insurance for the seller. You know, the seller doesn't have to extend any money in order to fill this form out. They don't have to do anything. So let's be clear here. They don't have to do anything. No matter what anybody is telling you, in Southern California, the seller does not have to do anything in order to fulfill this form. And I'll go into more detail in a bit. So, so make sure that you're looking in the right area. Make sure that you're looking in all areas to see if it's in a high or very high zone. Then there's also a zone called, there's also a section in the NHD report called wildfire. If it could not be in a high or very high state, but it could be, yes, in a wildfire zone. So that's also something to look for. So just be aware of that. So let's move on to the first section that the seller has to fill out, and that's fire hardening. What is fire hardening vulnerabilities? It's like if you have a wood shake roof. You know, there still are some places that exist with wood shake roofs. Eaves and soffit ventilation, they have opening in excess of 1/8 of an inch. So your seller has to answer these questions. Now, it's just like the TDS and the SVQ. Are you aware? If you see in section B, are you, seller, aware of the following features? If they're not aware, the answer is no. But it's that simple. So roof covering made of untreated wood shingles. Well, if there's wood shingles, but they're not true, that if they don't know whether they're wood treated or they're treated wood shingles or not, then the answer is no. Single pane or non-tempered glass windows. You know, sometimes people don't know. Tempered glass. Just for your information, well, in LA, you have to do a retrofit, and if it's not tempered glass, then they have to put a film on it. But there is a little decal, not a decal, but it's etched into the glass of a sliding glass door, and it says that it's tempered. If that etching isn't on these doors, then they're not tempered. So just, you know, a bit of education for you. So they just answer these questions, and once again, either you're aware or you're not aware. Okay, so this is the confusing part. Okay, now we're talking about any questions up until now before I get into the second confusing part. I don't see any. Okay, so we're talking about two different things here. There is a local ordinance in some areas. I know Burbank Hills, other hillsides, a local ordinance that requires the homeowner to clear the brush around their property. If once a year they should be getting a notice from the city saying you need to clear your brush by this date. If you don't clear the brush, then we will do it for you and we'll charge you. Okay. So a homeowner is going to know whether they are in that local, it's called local vegetation management ordinance. So that's the first thing that we have to figure out when we're doing this form. Are they in a local vegetation management ordinance? And all that means is that they need to clear their brush, or else the fire department or whatever entity, it could be Cal Fire, is going to do it for them, and they'll charge them for it. So a homeowner is going to know that. Okay. So the property is either or is not subject to the local vegetation management. So let's say they are in a local vegetation management. Okay. So then we go to B, and I know that I know I'm jumping a little ahead, but I know after this there is this tree, or there's this thing that you should be able to answer, the seller should be able to answer the questions to, and it makes it so easy to fill this out. It's more confusing than just thinking about it the way that I'm telling you. So I would not use it. Maybe some people like it, but I do not. Okay. So so we're going to say that it is in a local vegetation management. So part B, seller representative of property compliance with the applicable state defense space requirement or local vegetation ordinance, hereafter state or local defensible space law, at the time of seller's signature. So the first option is the seller is unaware of whether the property is in compliance with the applicable state or local defensible space law, and the seller does not have a report prepared by an authorized defensible space inspector. 9 times out of 10, your sellers, if they are in a local vegetation management area, that's going to be the answer. They're unaware whether they're in compliance or not. So then they don't have to check anything there. So let's look at the other two options. Property is in compliance with the state or local defensible space law, whichever is applicable. If only state law applies, seller must have obtained compliance within the last 6 months. Seller shall deliver to buyer documentation of compliance after seller's execution of the fire hardening form. Okay, so if they know that they're in compliance, they must have been given something that tells them that they're in compliance. That could be they did have their brush cleared, and the local fire department or Cal Fire, you're good to go, gave them something that they're good to go. So if they do know that, and they have this piece of paper that says they are in compliance, to produce that piece of paper, and you would check that box. So that's that. So the third option is property is not in compliance with the state defensible law if seller has or agrees to obtain a report prepared by an authorized defensible space inspector. Seller shall deliver such report to buyer within X number of days. So if it's not in compliance, but the seller's willing to have this inspection done to say that they're in compliance, which I don't know the seller that really wants to do this. So you would check that box. So that's section B. Most likely you're not going to check any boxes. The seller is unaware of whether the property is in compliance when we're talking about it is in a local vegetation management. That's all we're talking about, is in a local vegetation management ordinance. So that's section B. Now, section C is buyer and seller agreement regarding which property shall obtain compliance with applicable state or local defensible space requirements. So what they're talking about in section C is there a local ordinance in your area that requires the seller to get this report by close of escrow? And I am telling you, no matter what anybody else is saying, in Southern California, there is no ordinance that requires a seller to get this report prior to close of escrow. It does not exist. Only in Truckee and Santa Rosa and that area, in like around Sacramento, those are the only places that I have heard that requires this at point of sale. Will it be changing? Who knows? Maybe. But right now, it is not required. So the seller does not have to get this as a point of sale requirement. So the very first option is buyer responsibility. No local ordinance. Buyer shall obtain documentation of compliance with the state defensible space law within 1 year of close of escrow. That's it. So also a buyer responsibility. This is if there is a local vegetation management ordinance in effect. Local vegetation management ordinance in effect, which requires compliance as a result of sale of property. No, that's not an option. Because there is nothing in Southern California that requires you to do it at point of sale. And then there is buyer responsibility, local vegetation management ordinance in effect, which does not require compliance as the result of sale of property. Buyers shall obtain documentation of compliance with the state defensible state law within 1 year of close of escrow. So that is, if there is a local vegetation maintenance management ordinance that they have to clear their brush, if that is in effect, you would check that box. Everything 4, 5, and 6 that says seller responsibility does not apply. So only the default of there's no local ordinance, you don't have to check anything, or if there is a local ordinance in effect, but it doesn't require compliance as the result of the sale, which is number 3, those are the only 2 options. Now, there is a third option. If your seller really is a good guy or girl or gal, seller responsibility agreement to obtain. If the seller really wants to obtain this for the buyer, then you can check number 6. All right. And then number 4 is if you have this inspection report, you would check that. If they don't have it in their possession, you can obtain a copy from some entity. You can do that. Okay. So that really is form. I know it's confusing because you're talking about local brush maintenance, but all you have to do is know that there is no requirement at point of sale or transfer of the property that requires a seller to get this report. It doesn't exist. Cal Fire on their website says it does. It does not. CAR has been trying to get them to change that. They don't really seem to be cooperating, but that's that. So with that said, are there any questions regarding this form?
Yeah, so earlier, sorry, I had to take a call and I had to hop in and out.
Sure.
Did you say that so this document, we don't have to check anything at all?
No,
Did I hear
I
that
did
right?
not say that.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I did not say that. I did not say that. You don't have to check anything if this, the first part, if there's a local vegetation management and the seller's unaware whether it's in compliance, you don't have to check that. And then on section C, if there is no local ordinance for local management, and it's the buyer's responsibility to get it within 1 year, you don't have to check anything. So those are the two instances where you don't have to check anything. Make sense?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions?
If we don't know this information and, to look, knowledgeable in front of your client as the seller, what do you suggest? So they don't know and you don't know.
If they don't know if they have a local, they're not aware that they have a local brush maintenance, then you say that there is no brush maintenance. If they would be aware, they would be made aware. I mean, you're getting notices throughout, every fire season, which seems to be earlier and earlier, but the homeowner is getting notices about clearing brush if there is a local ordinance. If they don't, then it's not, and then you answer the questions accordingly. And let me go back to it.
Like the beginning, like the section in the first page.
Well, the section in the first page, that's the easiest part. You're talking about this section here, fire hardening disclosure.
Yeah. Yes. This. Okay. I'm reading.
Yeah. That's the easy part. The question is, are you aware of any of the following? If they're not aware of it, then the answer is no. So that's simple. Are you aware of roof coverings made of untreated wood shingles? If they're not aware, if they have wood shingles, but they don't know if they're treated or not, then they're not aware. Then the answer is no. So, that's really the easy part. The difficult part is this defensible space thing, because there is local vegetation management ordinances. So, like I said, if they have that, then they should know that, because they would have been told that they would get notices that they have to clear the brush. Because if you don't clear the brush, they're going to do it for you. They're going to charge you, and if you don't pay them, they're going to put a lien on your property. Here's another thing that comes up is that, well, the buyer wants to do it, so they're just going to have the fire department or a Cal Fire come and do this and do it anyway. Do it now. The answer to that is no, because it's in the RPA that the buyer cannot have any governmental entity on the property to do any type of inspection. So those are governmental entities, and they would not be allowed to come to the property to do this inspection. So, yeah, but I've heard, I haven't seen any yet, but I've heard there are like independent inspectors who are doing this inspection in regards to compliance. They would be allowed on because they're not a governmental, and it's like any other inspector. but I haven't seen any of them, but I've heard that they exist. But I haven't seen any of them. So, any other questions about this? I
Hi,
don't
Rich.
see
This
him.
is Susie. How are you?
Hi.
I wanted I had a very important conversation with my current offer situation. So I just jumped in late. I'm sorry. So what are you recovering today? Is it a zip? Which zip form are you covering today?
It's two. It's the Avid and the fire hardening, and the recording will be sent out probably tomorrow or the next day.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Not seeing any. All right. So thanks for joining me. Like I said, I am recording this. It will go out tomorrow or the next day. No, I shut my own video off. What did I do here? Here we go. And you should be on the lookout. I actually, both of these, I've last week's part one, disclosures part one, and this one will go out together. So be on the lookout for that. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Bye.